title indicates, this is part 2 on making a sourdough and using it to bake with. I don't think it really matters which order you watch them in. At the end of this video there will be a link to part 1 if you haven't already watched it. But in part 1 I developed the sourdough culture and used it to make pizza and waffles. And now that I have the sourdough culture developed, or almost developed, it begins by the final development at the beginning of the video, I take you through the process of making a sourdough bread using only the sourdough culture, no added yeast. And I must say, bragging at the beginning of the video, very pleased with how it turned out. So I hope you'll watch this, and if you haven't already seen part 1, when you get to the end of this video, there will be a link so you can watch that, and I really don't think it makes much difference which order you watch them in. If I've counted correctly, this is the 4th rising, and it does seem to be getting stronger every time. I just discovered, well, I knew there were markings, but I didn't know what they all meant. There are markings on this side of it that show how many cups, and it was down to about 1 cup when I put it in there. And now it's up to 2 cups, and that's higher than it went the other time. So it is increasing every time, but it's at the 2-cup point, and it will be, there's another mark up here somewhere for 3, so I guess the whole thing must hold about 4 cups. But anyway, once it completely fills the container while it's rising, that is when you can use it to attempt to make a sourdough bread. So if it continues like it's doing, I guess that's probably going to be at least another couple of risings, but we will see. I'll show you each one anyway. Looking a lot better. Almost full. It's up to the 3-cup mark exactly. There's a little line right there that indicates 3 cups in here. I suspect the next time that I refresh this, which is going to start here in just a few moments, that it may indeed be full, but I'm going to do it one more time beyond that because of the time of day that it is now. It's almost 6 p.m., so the next refresh I'll let go for about 6 hours until midnight, and then I will do it again because I don't want to start making bread at midnight. And also the making of the loaf isn't, I don't think it's that difficult, but it's time involved. It's a very slow ferment with sourdough, not like you were using other yeast, and that's what I want to try, is just the pure sourdough. They also have a recipe like I've done in the past where you can add yeast along with the sourdough and still get the sourdough flavor, but it's faster. But I want to try my hand at making it with just the sourdough, so we are getting there, I think. I'll show you the next one at midnight. Well, that's after 6 hours, almost full again, so I'm hoping one more time in 8 hours that it will be, I think the term they use is ripe, ready to use anyway. Gonna say it is. Tomorrow morning I'm gonna start trying to make the loaf of bread. Hopefully you can see in there, it still didn't quite fill the jar, but I'm going to go with it and see if we can make a loaf of sourdough bread. What I have to do now is empty this out and start the process again with 4 ounces of the culture, 4 ounces of flour, and 4 ounces of water. And the remaining part, the leftover cup, is what I will use to make the bread. So, and I think it said, I'll have to double check, but I think it said that you can now store it, of course, in the refrigerator for up to a week without having to do anything to it, and then bring it back out and feed it again in the same manner. But I think it said that you leave it out for 6 hours before you refrigerate it. I'll double check that. I'm quite sure that's what it said. Well, that is what I'm going to be using, and this is the 4 ratio thing again, and I double checked. It says to leave it out at room temperature for 1 to 2 hours until it starts to bubble again. So once it started bubbling, you refrigerate it, and you can keep it refrigerated for up to a week without feeding it. And if you're going to use it again after a week, you should probably put it through at least 2 of these cycles to develop the yeast again. So there's a link with King Arthur flour to these instructions that are quite similar to the ones that came with the culture, the starter. So I will put that below the video. Now I'm going to assemble the rest of the ingredients and start making that loaf of bread. Well, I should say, I guess, that I am cutting their recipe in half, for what they're calling the naturally leavened sourdough bread. Their recipe makes two loaves, and you would also need to develop a larger amount of culture. You need 2 cups where I'm only using 1. And also they're baking it on a baking stone, like a pizza stone or whatever, in the oven. And I don't intend to do that either. I'm going to bake it inside of the Dutch oven, the same as I do with the no-knead bread. I've done that before with one of my previous efforts at sourdough, and it worked quite well. It holds the moisture in so that it gets the oven spring that you get normally in a steam-injected oven without having to throw water in your oven or whatever to create the steam. So that's the method I'm going to try. If it fails, it's my fault, I guess. The ingredients are certainly few and quite simple. There's the 1 cup, 8 ounces of the starter. And in the bowl with the flour, I have 10.5 ounces of unbleached all-purpose flour. I'm surprised that they didn't say bread flour. But anyway, I'm doing what they said to use, the all-purpose flour, and 1.5 ounces of whole wheat flour. So those are both in that same bowl. 7 ounces of room temperature water, and 1.25 teaspoons of salt, and that is it. So let's get the stand mixer over here and get to work. We'll combine all of the ingredients except the salt that goes in later. A lot of clicking, clacking noises here on the bowl. I want to try to get all of it in there if possible, or as much of it as I can get in there anyway. It smells very good, very yeasty, with a sourdough smell. If you can imagine what a sourdough smell is like, I guess, but it does have an excellent aroma to it. Both of the flours in this one container, and the water. And it says to mix this until it comes together into a cohesive ball, dough, whatever. And if necessary, add a little bit of extra water or a little bit of extra flour if it doesn't look like it's making a soft but sort of sticky dough. So I will start this up and let it go for a few minutes. And I'll bring you back in a few minutes after this has come together. As is usual, the stand mixer makes so much noise it's hard to hear me, but that has come together nicely. I don't think I'll add anything, either water or flour, to it. Now you shut this off and cover the bowl with plastic wrap and let it rest for 20 minutes. I just put the dough hook down in there with it and covered the mixing bowl with plastic wrap, and now I'll set my timer for 20 minutes. It's had its 20 minutes rest. There. That wouldn't have been a good idea if I couldn't get that back on there. Now you add the salt, and it gets kneaded until it is a soft and supple dough, it says, anyway, until it really comes together. Probably 8 to 10 minutes. It's usually what it takes for a dough of this size anyway. So I'll bring you back in a few minutes. The salt is well incorporated, and it kneaded for, I think, roughly 10 minutes. I had a visitor come to the door, and I lost track of time. But it seems to be what they said it would be anyway. It's tacky, and It's come together nicely, but it's still a little tacky, and that's what it is supposed to be like. You can see the little bit of whole wheat flour that's in it. Now it gets covered and sets at room temperature for an hour. I will see you in an hour. It's had an hour rest at room temperature, and it's sort of spread out and developed a bit. Now you turn it out onto a floured surface. Get it to the bowl, it is. That's bad, I guess. Sort of pat it out a little bit. And you're doing a fold like you're folding a letter, it says. So, like that. And you turn it 90 degrees and pat it out again. And do that fold again. Back in the container, covered, and another hour at room temperature. Not a lot of work involved, but it's a time-consuming process, I guess. Lots of time to do other things in between, but it does take time. Well, this is the part that I'm going to be refrigerating and keeping until the next time I want to use it. I have to refresh it within a week, whether you're going to use it or not, I guess, to keep it strong. But it's been a little less than 2 hours at room temperature, and if you can see down in there, it has almost doubled in bulk, so it is nice and active. Now you can put it in the refrigerator. It's had its hour, and now turn it out of the bowl once more. And if this were the large double batch, you would cut it in half, divide it in half, and then shape it into a round. This is just a temporary shaping, but it's covered for 20 minutes. It's had its 20-minute rest, and now it gets its final shaping and gets put into a bowl to do its last rise. They're recommending a bowl lined with like a tea towel that's been floured. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to use parchment paper, and this is a Martha Stewart trick. If you ball up your parchment paper, it will fit into a irregular shape better and stay there. I'm using parchment paper because I just pick it up, parchment paper and all, and it's finished its rising, and I put it in the Dutch oven along with the parchment paper. It might be stuck a bit to the parchment paper when you put it in, but it's never too bad when it comes out. You can separate them quite easily. So. Also, they're putting theirs in their bowl with the seam side up. You'll see what I mean here in a minute, hopefully. Because when they turn it out into the onto the stone that they're going to bake it on, then the seam side would be down. So I don't do that either. My seam side will be down to begin with because I'm not going to be turning it. So all you're doing now is bringing it together several times. That creates more surface tension and helps the loaf to stay in shape better. Just keep bringing it over like this into the center until it gets tight, and I can feel it getting tighter now all the time. I just broke a bubble there, so it is forming some bubbles. I'm not expecting this to have the structure inside that the no-knead bread has, but maybe there will be some bubbles in there. Okay. Hope I shouldn't have used a larger bowl. I don't know. It's in that bowl. The bowl's going to stay in anyway, I guess. And I always put a little flour over the top, especially when I'm using the no knead, just so the tea towel that covers it won't stick to the dough. So now you cover it up with a tea towel with English sheep on it. You have to have a tea towel that has all the English sheep on. And this, believe it or not, rests at room temperature for 2.5 hours. This is a long process. I hope the loaf is worth it when I finish here. So I'll bring you back in 2.5 hours. An hour and a half into this, you should start preheating the oven to 450 degrees. And I'm going to be preheating the oven with my Dutch oven in there, heating up as well. So I'll bring you back when it's time for this to go in the oven. It's had its 2.5 hours, and the oven is heated. Now you slash the top, either with a razor blade or a thing called a lame, and that's a lame. It's just a razor blade that's used by bakers, that's all. You know, little thing that holds it. That will allow it to develop a bit more oven spring, hopefully. And now it's going to go in my Dutch oven. My old Dutch oven that's seen better days. It's had many a loaf of no knead bread baked in it. That's 450 degrees. I will leave it for 30 minutes in the Dutch oven with the cover on. And at the end of that time, I'll remove the cover and 10 to 15 minutes or so to brown it some more. But that depends on how brown it is when I remove the cover. It's had its 30 minutes. It grew. I don't know, maybe 10 minutes or so. Timer on for 10 minutes anyway. And I must say the aroma is wonderful. Totally different than baking just an ordinary, yeast white bread. The sourdough smell is magnificent. It's all through the house. Well, I think that looks pretty good. It's definitely a bowl. It's turned into a ball. Got a lot of good oven spring. You can see where, the cut that I made in the top of it, how much it has sprung open. Now the hard part, I have to wait until it's completely cooled before I can cut it and taste it. The smell is absolutely wonderful. So I'm very pleased with the progress that this has made down through the many phases. And the 2 items that I made with the just discard were both excellent. I would do them both again, I think. If you have never tried a sourdough, I don't think King Arthur is the only place that you can get a culture from. I'm sure there must be others, but it'd be a good idea to give it a try anyway. Find yourself some starter to get started with. It's very easy and I think quite rewarding. But we'll cut this in a bit and see what it tastes like. Well, I think it's cooled enough to cut. I'm going to cut it anyway. The way I cut a round loaf like this, I suppose there's many different ways of doing it, but I prefer first to cut it in half. It's still quite fresh. I don't want to crush it. Okay. Well, that's what the interior looks like. There's not, as I suspected, there's not a great deal of large hole structures. Still smells very good though. And once I've cut it in half, I just put it over like that. And I can cut it with my right hand or not, but I'll give it a try. slice here, I hope. And there are some larger holes once you get inside of it. Put a little butter on it. And give this a try. Very good. It's got that sharp sourdough flavor. Definitely a keeper, talking my mouthful. I hope to keep that culture going so that I can do this many more times in the future. Well, thank you very much for watching. And like I said at the beginning of the video, I guess, if you actually give this a try yourself, I'd love to know how it works out for you. Well, hello everybody. I hope you enjoyed that. I'm very impressed with the starter. Didn't develop it myself, as you know. It came from King Arthur flour, but it works excellently. I was so surprised to see how much that loaf expanded in the oven, and the flavor and texture is absolutely excellent. If, as I said at the beginning of this video, you hadn't seen part 1, there will be a link come up here momentarily, perhaps now. Click on that and it will take you to part 1. Thank you very much for watching.